Well, hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Meta Church. We are starting a brand new series today on Jesus, and I'm going to jump into it here, and I want to begin by asking you a question. Have you ever noticed how easy it is for something to lose its importance or its significance when you're accustomed to it being a part of your life? Like for something that's just a natural, normal part of your life, something that's impactful in your life, but you kind of lose sight of it when you're used to it being around. Not that it loses its luster, or not that it loses its importance. You just don't think about it as often. You just don't consider it as frequently, or think about what you would do if that thing was no longer part of your life. And I'll give you some kind of like casual or simple examples, okay? Like there's things that we don't think about, but they have an impact, and you don't realize how much of an impact it had until it's gone. So for instance, when I went to college, I grew up, I'm half Puerto Rican, half Colombian. So I grew up in my home, childhood through adolescence, thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of rice and beans. I mean, that was basically like our meal du jour. We were eating rice and beans on a near daily basis, with other things seasoned different ways, but it was like rice and beans. And so as a kid, it was just such a normal part of my life that actually I was kind of tired by it. I was kind of bored with it. And I remember it wasn't until I went to college away from my parents and living in a dorm and eating college food that I realized, like, man, I actually miss rice and beans. I crave rice and beans. Like I didn't realize, I didn't think about how much of an impact rice and beans has had on my life, and how much it was something that I just wanted, whether it was arroz con gandules or arroz con habichuelas. It was just like, this is what I want. And I can't get it, or I don't have it. And it just, this impact. And even to this day, like what I realized that whenever I have rice and beans, it just kind of brings this nostalgia, like this comfort, that there's like an impact like that rice and beans has on my life. Right? So that's one thing. But like another thing, for those of us who live in New York City, right? We live in this city, and there's a lot of things we love about New York. There's a lot of things we don't love about New York that frustrate us about New York. But one of those things for you, I don't know if it's for you, but one of those things for me happens to be Times Square. Like Times Square, I get it, I see it, I understand it, but I do whatever I can to stay away from it. It's not my, I'm not hanging out there on the weekend. Let's just put it that way. And so I get why tourists come and all that stuff. But it's just one of those things that I try to avoid. But do you realize there are people in my life, there are people who are connected to us in some way or another, and they follow on social media, or they reach out to us because of the fact that like we live in New York City. There's something that like Times Square that like is just like a normal part of our lives, something that we might even try to avoid. But do you realize like Times Square, depending on what you read, is either like the number 1 or the number 2 tourist destination in the whole world? That like in the entire world, Times Square is like either the first or second place in the world that people from all over, the tens of millions of people, want to come to. And we, those of us who are in New York, do whatever we can to avoid it, right? So there's that. There's another thing, like, I'm an American citizen. I was, born in the United States. So I have my citizenship here. And so I can say I'm an American. And there's things that, like, living in America, there's things that I'm used to as an American citizen that I don't even think about its impact. Of course, there's, I have the right to vote. There's things I can do legally that other people don't have the chance or the opportunity to do, whether it's working or earning a living or things along those lines. And it's like, those are just things that are a part of my life. But I don't really think about, I don't really consider what bearing or what impact it has on my life. It's like we get so used to, and there's things that you have in your life as well. It's just we get so used to, seeing, doing, having something as part of our lives that we forget to consider what impact or what significance it has on our life. And you can know it, you can say it, you can experience it. But even then, that doesn't mean that you think about it. And I think the same is true for faith and in Christianity. I think there are things, those of us who are followers of Jesus, and I don't know where you're at on the spectrum, but if you're a follower of Jesus, if you're someone who has placed your faith in Christ, there are things that we who identify as Christians that we say, things that we are familiar with, things that we know, but we don't always think about their implications. And I'll give you kind of a few examples, right? Like the idea of calling ourselves Christian. Well, we say that and we say, yes, I'm a Christian, but we don't really think about what that means or what that should mean in our lives. And now Christian, the word Christian actually came or was kind of introduced because there was a group of people who followed the way of Jesus, who were so much living like Jesus and doing so much like him that other people started calling them little Christ. And that's where we have derived our word Christian. It means you are so much like him that you are like a little Christ. Or there's other words, right? Like a believer. We say, oh, my family, my mom or my dad, they're not a believer, or they're not believers, and we say that, but like, believers in what? Well, what we say or what we mean when we say that is that as a believer, I have placed my faith. I believe that Jesus Christ is the Lord and Savior. I believe that he died on a cross, and I believe that he rose again from that grave to give me eternal life. So I am a believer in Jesus. We say things about, they're not a believer, or like salvation. And so we say, well, salvation, yeah, we've been saved, but we don't think about the ramifications of that. We don't always kind of give it the thought or the consideration for what impact that has. Yes, I know my eternity is set, but what does that mean, actually? What does that mean for those who don't have their eternity set? And it's things like that we say, things like that we're accustomed to, things like that are just a part of our lives, but we don't always consider the impact or what bearing it has. And it's not just things that we say, it's things that Jesus said or things that were said of Jesus. You see, Jesus said things, there were things that were said of Jesus that many of us know, many of us are familiar with, many of us have even embraced, but we don't always consider what they mean or what implication or what bearing they have on us, those of us who follow the way of Jesus. I'll give some examples, right? Jesus was the Son of God. Jesus called himself the Son of God. But what does that mean? Yeah, he's the Son of God. We believe, well, what that means or what that implies is that there's like a level of divinity, that he is divine, that he's not like us. He is, but he's not. Because he's the Son of God, because he came from God. He is divine. He is God. He said he was the Messiah, that he came to save. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that apart from him, there is no salvation. Apart from him, we don't know salvation. And he also said that he would be king, that he would come and that he would return one day as king. Well, if he's king, that means we surrender. If he's king, that means he's Lord of our lives. And all of these things, right, whether it's things that Jesus said, whether it's things that we embody, all of this kind of leads us into this series. And really the crux or kind of the idea that I want to kind of flesh out over the next few weeks is that if Jesus was who he said he was, if the things said of Jesus are true, Son of God, Messiah, King, then what impact or what does that mean for our lives? What should it mean for our lives? I mean, those are lofty claims, right? Those are things that you don't just kind of say casually. And so if they're true, if they're real, then what impact do they have? What bearing do they play in our lives? If we can take Jesus at his word, and I'm just going to go ahead and say this just kind of from the outset, we're going to go ahead and take Jesus at his word and believe that he is the Son of God and believe that he is the Messiah and accept that he is the King. And I'm not saying like in a spiritual sense, I'm just saying like let's just kind of play this out. Okay, if he said these things and if those things are true, then what would that actually mean for our lives? Those are the questions that are at the root of this series. Those are the questions that over the next few weeks, we're going to kind of flesh out. And what I hope to convey is simply this, that if Jesus is who he says he is, then you can follow him, you can trust him, you can worship him, and you can come back to him. If Jesus is the Son of God, if Jesus is the Messiah, if Jesus is King, then you can follow him. You can trust him, you can worship him, and you can come back to him. And this brings me and leads me to the topic of today's sermon, something that Jesus did say, something that Jesus did offer, or something that Jesus did speak about. And that is this word, follow. Follow. Now it's interesting, many Christians would identify as a follower of Christ. And I will raise my hand and for one would say, yes, I consider myself a follower of Christ. And this too can be something that we say without really thinking about its implications. Say we're a follower of Jesus or a follower of Christ. But when we say we are a follower of Jesus, and when Jesus instructed people to follow, what he was instructing and what we are saying is this, that we are engaging. To follow means to engage in a calling or a way of life. To engage in a calling or a way of life, that means that we're kind of throwing ourselves into something actively, intentionally, and it's changing who we are and changing how we do things and changing how we go about things. And truth be told, when you think about that definition of follow, truth be told, we don't just do that for anyone or anything. We don't just randomly throw our lives or engage in something as a calling or follow something as a calling. In fact, just the opposite. Imagine for a moment that you step outside your home, you step outside your building, you step outside your place of work, and some guy out there is like, hey, Ricky. Hey, you, like, just come follow me. And you're like, who are you? Don't worry about it, just follow me. And like what we would do is like, no, I'm not going to follow you. I'm going to go like the opposite direction of you. Like you walk that way so that I can make sure to walk this way. Okay, like that's what we're going to do. And even if it's someone we know, even if it's someone we trust, like we're not looking at this as like, oh, you know what? Like, let me just go ahead and follow random people and engage as a calling or as a way of life. Yet somehow, this is what we see Jesus did. Like this, it's kind of like what we read, right? Matthew chapter 4 gives us like great insight into this. And so Matthew chapter 4 kind of shares a little snippet, verses 18 through 20. And this is what Matthew wrote. He says, one day as Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, also called Peter, and Andrew, throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Verse 19, Jesus called out to them and said, come follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people. And they left their nets and at once followed him. So there's that word, right? Follow and followed. It says, Jesus says, hey, follow me. And they're like, okay, we'll follow you. But then John gives a little bit more context. The gospel writer John kind of shares this same story, but gives a little bit more detail. And so I want to flip over and read just a few verses out of there, starting in chapter 1, verse 42. And so you'll see these up on the screen. And John kind of writes, and he says this, then Andrew brought Simon to meet Jesus, and looking intently at Simon, Jesus said, your name is Simon, son of John, but you will be called Cephas, which means Peter. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee, and he found Philip and said to him, come follow me. And Philip was from Bethsaida, and Andrew and Peter's hometown. So then Philip went to look for Nathanael, who was his brother, and told him, we have found the very person Moses and the prophets wrote about. His name is Jesus, the son of Joseph from Nazareth. Nazareth, exclaimed Nathanael. Can anything good come from Nazareth? Come and see for yourself, Philip replied. And as they approached, Jesus said, now here is a genuine son of Israel, a man of complete integrity. How do you know about me? Nathanael asked. And Jesus replied, I could see you under the fig tree before Philip found you. Verse 49, then Nathanael exclaimed, Rabbi, you are the Son of God, the King of Israel. And then Jesus said to them, or Jesus asked them in verse 50, do you believe this just because I told you I had seen you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than this. Now, I used to read these passages and think about how crazy this was. Like, for them to just abandon everything and just follow a guy because he showed up to say and said, follow me. Like think about this, right? Like, imagine you're just at work, which is what these guys were doing. Like, for us, this means nothing, but for them, they're at work. And so you're at work, someone shows up to your place of work and says, hey, follow me. And then you say, okay. And you leave your job and you go and you follow this person. Like, and I would hear these sermons preached about how radical these guys were to leave their nets behind and to follow this kind of like relative stranger, like this mysterious person who just showed up. Like, and again, we as far as I know, there are no fishermen at Meta Church, no professional fishermen. So when you and I think about fishing, those of us listening, those of us watching, we're thinking about fishing as a recreational hobby or sport. And so, yeah, okay, no big deal. But these guys, this was their career. This was their job. This is how they provided for themselves and how they earned a living for their families. And so imagine some random guy showing up to your job and saying, hey, leave your job behind and come follow me. Just quit. And it's just like this kind of radical, like, revolutionary, borderline reckless way to live life. And I mean, has anyone else ever considered that or thought about that? Like, I don't know, maybe it's just the New Yorker in me and that I'm jaded. I can't imagine or fathom a circumstance or situation where like I would just be willing to follow a stranger at random to quit my job and try to explain to my wife why I'm no longer working because I'm following some random person who showed up to my job unannounced. Like, that just doesn't make sense. And it wasn't until actually my first visit to Israel where this started to kind of where God actually started to like reveal and show like, no, there's a different kind of side to this story. And it was upon my first visit to the village of Capernaum, this village where this experience actually took place. A small little village on the waterfront and the Sea of Galilee. And this little village, you'll see kind of a photo up on the screen, is not very large. In fact, geographically, its geographic footprint is about the size of one New York City block. Not very big, not very large at all. And in the time of Jesus' date, it's believed there were about 1,100 residents. So a small village, a small town. Now, I went to a high school of about 3,000 kids, and we knew a lot of kids. I didn't know everyone, but you didn't have to be popular to know the majority of people. You're there, 180 days a year for 4 years. So you get to know people, you get to know stories, you get to hear about people. So you can imagine how intensified that would have been in a small village of 1,100, a small town, where everyone knows each other, everyone connects. That person, their mom, their sister, their cousin, their dad, their uncle, their children. Like, everyone knows everyone. And it wasn't just that everyone knows everyone. They lived in a bartering society, in a bartering culture. So they were trading and exchanging goods and services. Hey, I'll trade you 5 loaves of bread for 2 fish. I'll trade you, X amount of work for X amount of goods. Like, it was a bartering society, which means that you're connecting with people, you're engaging with them, you're interacting with them, you're like well tied in. And all of this, the size of the village, the nature of the relationships that would have been there, the culture and the customs of bartering and communication and going to the synagogue, all of those things point to the reality that these guys who chose to follow Jesus, that their decision to follow, albeit important, wasn't nearly as radical as it might look on the surface, wasn't nearly as crazy as it might sound. These guys knew Jesus. They connected with Jesus. They interacted with Jesus. Jesus knew their families. Jesus knew what was happening, potentially what was happening in their lives. They knew what was happening in Jesus' life. And so this wasn't as foreign, as unfamiliar, or as mysterious as it sounds on the surface, but that still leaves the question. Why would they follow him? Why would they choose to follow him? And I think there are 2 reasons, one obvious and one not so obvious. And I think the obvious answer is simply this: Jesus was the type of person they would want to follow. Jesus was the type of person they would want to follow. Now think about your life. Think about the people you follow. And it can be people you follow on social media, and it can be people you follow in real life. Now, you follow them because you want to follow them. I'm assuming you follow whoever you follow on Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat or whatever it might be, that you follow them because you want to follow them. And in real life, it's the same way, whether you follow your mom or your dad or your boss or your coworker or a friend or your pastor or your church leader. Like, you follow them because you want to follow them. And clearly, Jesus was the type of person that was worthy of being followed. Clearly, Jesus was the type of person they would want to follow. They left their careers, they left their families, they left their routines to go on this kind of ambiguous adventure and follow this man. And all of that points back to the type of person that Jesus was, the way he handled his business, the way he engaged with people in his vicinity, the way he cared, the way he communicated, the way he touched lives, the way he was interacting with people and engaging with them, the way he carried himself in public and in private. All of those things point to the fact that this was someone they wanted to follow. So that, to me, is the first and obvious reason. But the second reason is one that might not be as considered, but one that's equally important, maybe even more so, or not more so, but significantly practical for you and for me. And that's that Jesus made the process of following him simple. Jesus made the process for following him simple. Now, this doesn't sound revolutionary, at least not yet, but you have to consider the context in which Jesus lived, the historical period, the religious kind of makeup of the society and the culture. This is first century Judaism. And what we know is that in first century Judaism, the people were accustomed to following. In fact, ideally and optimally, you would follow your local rabbi. That's who you would follow. But it wasn't just open to anyone. What we know is that first century Judaism had a very thoughtful and thorough and fully developed educational process. What we know is from these writings from the Mishnah, we know what took place and how this is kind of intentionally staged and progressively difficult, or the challenges, if you will, progressively increased by age. You see, ancient Judaism had a very, very well-developed process for educating, for learning, and ultimately for performing so that the best and the cream of the crop could kind of rise to the surface. You see, at age 5, here's Jewish custom. At age 5, all children, boys and girls alike, would begin their education process. And they would begin learning the scriptures. They would begin learning from the book of the Torah, the first 5 books of our Old Testament. Now at age 10, the formal education process would cease for the girls. And so that kind of weaned off a segment of the population. So at age 10, the girls' formal education process had already completed. But for the boys, it would continue on, and it would kind of move from learning about the Torah to the memorization of the Torah and the interpretation of it for application, meaning like, can you memorize it? Can you now know it? Can you understand it? Can you kind of begin to apply this? By age 13, kind of the next tier of kind of weaning off a group of the population, because now it's about who can fulfill the commandments most accurately or best. Which boys at age 13 in Jewish custom, that's when a boy became a man. So now which of you in becoming a man can now carry out the commandments? By age 15, there was kind of another tier or another phase. At age 15, there was now like kind of rabbinic interpretations. In other words, it was kind of selecting those who had the ability or showed an aptitude or demonstrated an ability to be able to teach. And it was kind of like a college application kind of process where like they would then try to like get under the tutelage of a rabbi. And of course, the best rabbis would select the best students. The best rabbis would select the best proteges. By ages 18 to 20, a man had his kind of vocation already determined. He's going to be a fisherman. He's going to be a carpenter. He's going to be a farmer. That was already set between the ages of 18 and 20. And at age 30, for those who kind of continued under the tutelage of a rabbi, who were selected and kind of brought into the likes of the Harvards and the Yales, so to speak, of ancient Israel, by age 30, they were then given the authority and the ability to teach others and formally be called a rabbi. This was the process. Now, if you were keeping track, it started at age 5, and at age 30 is when it was completed. And so 25 years, and that was the process it took to become someone worthy of being followed, but people would pursue and aim to try to follow in that path. But it wasn't like that with Jesus. Instead, he simplified the process, and instead he offered an invitation to everyone. Whether you're a first century Jew or a 21st century you, he said you could be a part of this. You could follow me. And I want to use this text in John 1 to help us see, to kind of visualize or illustrate this process that Jesus introduced for following him and what it means when Jesus invited or called out and said, "Follow me." And I want to go back to verses 38 and 39 of John chapter 1. This is what John writes, and he says this. We're told about two people, some of the followers of John the Baptist, who hear that Jesus is around, and so they begin following Jesus. And in verse 38, Jesus looked around and saw them following, and he asked them, "What do you want?" And they replied, "Rabbi," which means teacher. So clearly, they recognized him as a rabbi, and they said, "Where are you staying?" Notice Jesus' response in verse 39. "Come and see." It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when they went with him to the place where he was staying, and they remained with him the rest of the day. Now, it is commonly believed that Jesus himself followed and completed the rabbinic process. If you study his life and kind of the timeline from when he was a child moving to adulthood and when we know his public ministry began, and you compare it to that Mishnah educational process that I just outlined for you, there is ample evidence to suggest that Jesus himself was truly a rabbi. Now, we see that here, right? Like these people called out to him, and a rabbi wasn't just a title that you would just kind of throw out there casually or flippantly. So we see that with John's disciples, that they call out to Jesus as rabbi. But then notice how Jesus invited them, right? What were the words he said? "Come and see." Hey, where are you staying? They were following him. He says, "Well, come and see." And it says they went with him and they stayed with him the rest of the day. You see, this wasn't typical This was atypical. This was not normal for rabbis. Rabbis didn't simply invite anyone to follow. They didn't simply invite anyone to come along and just hang out with them. They didn't invite the unwanted or the not good enough. And we know, if you read scripture, we know that the religious leaders already had plenty of issues and plenty of beef, so to speak, with John the Baptist and his followers. They were not happy or pleased with John the Baptist. So we knew they weren't going to invite his followers to come and hang out with them. Yet this is exactly what Jesus did. You see, with Jesus, it was different. What Jesus offered to them and what Jesus offers to you and what he offers to me is that we can belong. Belong. When he says, follow me, what he's saying is, hey, you belong. What he said to John the Baptist followers, hey, you belong. Come and see. Come hang out with me. Come and spend time with me. And I think this is so powerful and so profound at the same time because we all want to belong. We all feel that need to belong somewhere with someone as part of something. I mean, we've had so many new people coming to Meta Church and many of whom have just moved into the city. And I've heard over and over about like, yeah, I just moved here a week ago. I just moved here literally in one case yesterday. I just moved here a few months ago. And I knew like I need to find a church. I need to belong somewhere. And for many of us, man, this is such a deep desire that we want to belong. It's why we have the friends that we have. It's why we choose the places where we work. It's why we look for like anything. It's why for some of us, we've made bad or regrettable decisions because we were just desperate to belong somewhere. And what I love about Jesus is that it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. It doesn't matter if you're man, woman, young, old. It doesn't matter if you're successful and smart or if you're rejected and a failure. Jesus offers you a place to belong. And he says, hey, come be with me. Come and see. Come hang out. I saved you a spot. I kept your place. I care about you. I'm committed to you. And I've invited you to belong with me. You have a space here, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter what you've been through, and no matter what others say about you. I love that about Jesus. But I love that his invitation didn't just stop there. Because Jesus gave his followers an opportunity for more. He gave his followers an opportunity not just to belong, but to become. To become. You see, Jesus was never interested in people remaining idle or remaining the same. Rather, he was always concerned with helping people see what they couldn't see in themselves, become what they didn't know they were capable of, and fulfilling what God had intended for them all along. And we see this example back in his interaction with Nathanael. We read this earlier, but I'll reread it for you. Verses 45 through 48. It says, Philip went to look for Nathanael, and he told them, we have found the very person Moses and the prophets wrote about. His name is Jesus, the son of Joseph from Nazareth. Now Nazareth, exclaimed Nathanael, can anything good come from Nazareth? Come and see for yourself, Philip replied. And as they approached, Jesus said, now here is a genuine son of Israel, a man of complete integrity. And Nathanael asked, how do you know about me? And Jesus replied, I could see you under the fig tree before Philip found you. Now, what I love about this interaction is that Jesus confronts the skeptic, right? Nathanael is completely skeptical. He's completely doubtful, like Nazareth, no way anything good, and no way anything can come out of there. And what are you talking about, Philip? Don't bother me with this mess. And I love that because there are skeptics, there are people, maybe some listening, maybe some watching, who are like, man, I don't know, Jesus, nah, I don't know about that. Christianity, nah, I don't know about that. Leave me alone, don't bother me with this stuff. Come on, man, I've got things to do. I've got real things to believe in, real things to worry about, real things to concern myself with. And what I love about this is that Jesus immediately just comes to Nathanael and he calls out potential. He gives him new identity. He speaks something that Nathanael almost kind of rebuffs, how do you know me? Who are you? And what do you know about who I am? And I love that Jesus called, he said, man, this is a true son of Israel, a genuine man of integrity. And he called out something that maybe Nathanael didn't even see in himself. And I love that Jesus does the same for you. That when he invites you to follow, he's extending an invitation for you to become something. He doesn't just see you as you are. He sees you as who you could be. He sees you as what you could become. And he invites you to go on this journey. He invites you to follow and invites you to become something. And this is why this invitation is so much more, because it's not just about staying the same. It's not just about like being idle or stagnant or remaining unchanged or unfazed. It's about you. It's about you becoming who God destined for you to become. It's about you stepping into the full potential that God envisioned before your mother or your father ever knew who you were. And he says, become. And I'm convinced that Jesus implemented this process, that he introduced this process of following, because he knew that if you belong somewhere and that if you become something, then you would believe, and that would kind of lead you to this third part of the process where you just believe. You just believe. Like if you have a place where you feel welcomed, if you have a place where someone invites you in just as you are, if you have a place where you feel like you belong to this community, and if after belonging you realize there's potential to grow, potential to change, potential to become, then of course you're going to believe. You know what it's like? It's like these ads that we receive on TV or social media about like weight loss and health training regimens. And like they're always kind of put this kind of thing on it where it's like, you know, try 14-day guarantee or 30-day guarantee or your money back, like risk-free, you know, try it out. And what they're banking on is that you're going to try something and that you're going to start to see the results. In other words, you're going to become something. You're going to see your body or your health becoming and changing differently. And then once you experience that, you're going to say, yeah, I'm a believer. Now I'm in. Now I want this. And Jesus works and operates spirituality. Christianity works and operates the same way, that once you become something, once you belong somewhere, that all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I want to believe. And that's what we see in the life of Nathaniel when he responded, right? If I go back to verses 49 and 50, so he's like, how did you know about me? And then Jesus told him, I saw you under that tree. Then Nathaniel exclaimed, listen to this, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. And Jesus asked him, do you believe this just because I told you I had seen you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than this. Nathaniel's like, man, like I can come and hang out with him. Philip's like, hey, come and see. Nathaniel's like, okay, fine, cool, I'll go hang out. I can belong here. And then like, I'm a skeptic, I don't believe just yet. But he calls me out and says, hey, you're a man of potential. You're a man of integrity. You're a true son of Israel. And it's like, whoa, like you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. And then Jesus is like, that's all it took? That's all it took for you to believe? Man, Nathaniel, you are going to see greater things than this. And what I love, what I find so like kind of like fascinating about this text is this is the first time, get this, this is the first time Jesus makes any mention of believing. This is the first time Jesus brings it up. He's invited all these people to follow him. And not once was it conditional. Not once was it predicated upon whether or not they believed in him. Not once did he force Philip or Andrew or Nathaniel or Simon or the followers of John the Baptist to say, hey, do you believe in me so that you can follow me? Not once did he do that. Instead, he simply said, follow me. And I love this because this flips religion on its head. You see, so much of religion and so much of Christianity is wrapped up in this rigorous sequence of believe, become, belong. You have to believe just like us. You have to believe everything we believe, and you have to believe it the exact way that we believe it. And then once you do that, then you have to prove it by becoming something. You have to prove it by becoming better than everyone else. You have to prove it by becoming perfect. You have to prove it by showing how committed you are. And then once you become, then you can belong as part of our religion. Then maybe you can belong as part of our church. Then maybe you can belong as part of our community. But Jesus completely flipped the script. Jesus completely inverted the process. You see, religion says believe, become, belong. But Jesus said belong, become, and then you will believe. You see, Jesus said no matter who you are, you belong. No matter where you are, you can become something. And when you belong and when you become, then without question, you'll want to believe. You see, this is the invitation that Jesus is inviting you into. To follow him, to belong somewhere, to become something, and to believe in him. This is what it means to follow. You don't have to have all your ducks in a row. You don't have to have everything sorted out. You don't have to be the most knowledgeable. You don't have to be perfect. You don't need to be holier than everyone else. You can start wherever you are and find a place of belonging. Experience the power that helps you become, and believe in the one who makes it all possible. See, when Jesus said, "Follow me," what he meant is that you can belong with me, you can become someone, and you can believe in me. And with Jesus, this invitation still exists. And what I want you to know, church, is that you can follow him no matter where you're at, no matter how far away you think you are. You can step toward him and you can follow Jesus, just like Simon, just like Andrew, just like Philip, just like Nathaniel. You can follow him. Let me invite you to bow your heads and close your eyes as I close this out in prayer. Lord, we thank you for your word. We thank you for this example. And even today, as we see and as we receive, Lord, I pray that we would just experience belonging. I pray that we would know that you are welcoming us into your presence, into your home, just as you did. Hey, come and see. Come spend the day with me. Come spend a week with me. Spend some time with me and see for yourself. Lord, I pray that our people would respond in such a way where they would experience belonging, where they would experience becoming, and it would lead to them believing. I ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.